The charity gala at the Grandview Hotel was the kind of event where Seattle's elite came to be seen. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, and the air smelled of imported roses and expensive cologne. 32-year-old Elena Hartwell stood near the champagne fountain in a black dress she'd bought 6 years ago, watching her husband of 8 years laugh with a woman in emerald silk. His hand rested on the small of the other woman's back, fingers spread possessively, the same way he used to touch Elena before meetings, before dinners, before everything changed. The woman was Victoria Chan, 26, daughter of David Chan, the CEO of Meridian Technologies, where Elena's husband Marcus worked as Senior Vice President of Operations. Victoria leaned into Marcus, whispering something that made him throw his head back in genuine delight, a sound Elena hadn't heard directed at her in 18 months. Then Marcus turned, caught Elena's eye across the room, and his expression shifted from joy to something clinical and cold. He excused himself from Victoria and walked toward Elena with the measured stride of a man about to deliver bad news he'd rehearsed. When he reached her, he didn't touch her, didn't even stand particularly close. He simply said, in a voice barely above the chamber quartet playing Vivaldi, "I need you to make this easy. Sign the papers tomorrow. My lawyer will send them to your email tonight." Elena held her champagne flute with both hands, feeling the stem press against her palms. "We're doing this here?" Marcus glanced back at Victoria, who was watching them with curiosity, then returned his attention to Elena. "I've already moved my things out. The lease is in your name so you can have the apartment. I'm being generous." He spoke like he was discussing a corporate restructuring, clean and efficient. "Victoria and I are getting engaged next month. Her father is promoting me to executive vice president. It's better for everyone if we handle this quickly and quietly." Elena studied his face, the face she'd kissed on their wedding day, the face that used to smile at her over Sunday morning coffee. "Better for everyone," she repeated softly, letting the words sit between them. "Yes," Marcus said, straightening his tie, a nervous habit that betrayed his discomfort despite his controlled tone. "You'll be fine, Elena. You always land on your feet." Then he walked away, back to Victoria, back to his new life, leaving Elena standing alone by the champagne fountain with 300 witnesses who hadn't heard the conversation but would certainly notice when the divorce announcement came. Before we go any further, welcome to Leora Folktales, where we bring you stories of betrayal, revenge, and justice that will leave you speechless. If you believe no one should be discarded like yesterday's news, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from, and if you've ever felt underestimated by someone who should have valued you, let us know. This story is about to take turns you won't see coming, and you're going to want to be here for every single moment. Now let's continue with Elena's story, because what Marcus didn't know was about to destroy everything he thought he'd secured. Elena didn't cry at the gala. She finished her champagne, set the glass on a passing waiter's tray, and left through the side entrance where valets were smoking cigarettes and complaining about tips. She walked 4 blocks to her car in heels that had cost more than they were worth, drove to the apartment she'd apparently been granted like a consolation prize, and sat in the parking garage for 20 minutes before going inside. The apartment was exactly as she'd left it that evening. Clean, organized, impersonal. Marcus had indeed taken his things. The closet had gaps where his suits had hung. His gaming console was gone from the entertainment center. Even his stupid protein powder had been removed from the kitchen cabinet. He'd been thorough, she'd give him that. Elena changed into sweatpants and an old Stanford t-shirt, made chamomile tea she wouldn't drink, and opened her laptop. The divorce papers arrived in her email at 11:47 p.m., exactly when Marcus said they would. She read through them carefully, noting the language, the asset division, the timeline. Marcus was offering her the 12-year-old Honda, the apartment lease for the remaining 4 months, and half of their joint savings account, which amounted to $8,000. He was keeping his Meridian Technologies stock options, his 401k, his newer Tesla, and apparently his dignity. The papers requested she sign and return them within 72 hours to expedite the process. There was no alimony mentioned, no division of his upcoming promotion benefits, no acknowledgement that she'd supported him through graduate school, through 3 job changes, through the 60-hour weeks when Meridian had been courting him. The agreement assumed she'd contributed nothing of value to their marriage except her presence, which was now inconvenient. Elena closed the laptop and picked up her phone. She scrolled through her contacts until she found the name she wanted. James Hartwell, her older brother, a corporate attorney in San Francisco who specialized in hostile takeovers and contract disputes. She sent him a text. Marcus just served me divorce papers. I need to talk to you about Meridian Technologies. Call me when you're up. Then she went to bed and slept better than she had in 6 months. James called at 6:30 the next morning, which meant he'd been awake since 5, which meant he was already intrigued. Tell me everything, he said without preamble. Elena sat up in bed, rubbed her eyes, and gave him the condensed version. The gala, the announcement, the papers, Victoriachin, the promotion. When she finished, there was silence on the other end for exactly 7 seconds. Does Marcus know about Hartwell Capital? James asked carefully. Elena smiled for the first time since the gala. He knows I have family money. He doesn't know how much. He's never asked detailed questions. Another pause. Does he know you're the primary stakeholder in HCG Holdings? No, Elena said. Why would he? I've never discussed my portfolio with him. He thinks I do freelance consulting work. He's never been curious about what that actually means. James made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been something darker. Elena, HCG Holdings owns 43% of Meridian Technologies. You're not just a stakeholder. You're the controlling interest. David Chun has been CEO for 12 years because you've allowed it. The board answers to you. Elena pulled her knees up to her chest, wrapping her free arm around them. I know. Does Marcus know this? No. Does Victoria? I doubt it. Her father might, but I've never met her, and I've kept my involvement quiet. I inherited the portfolio from grandmother 6 years ago, right after Marcus and I got married. I've managed it remotely through proxies and board representatives. I've attended maybe 3 meetings in person, always under corporate representation. The Chun family knows Hartwell Capital exists and knows we hold the majority shares, but they don't know I'm the Hartwell in question. They think it's you or father. James was quiet for a moment, thinking, this is nuclear, Elena. If you want to, you can detonate Marcus's entire future in about 48 hours. But you need to be sure. Once you do this, there's no going back. Elena looked at the divorce paper still pulled up on her laptop screen, at the contemptuous terms, at the assumption she would simply accept being erased. I'm sure, she said. Good, James replied. Don't sign anything. I'll be in Seattle by tonight. We need to move carefully, but we need to move fast. Marcus called her 3 times that day. She didn't answer. He texted asking if she'd received the papers. She didn't respond. By evening, he was irritated enough to leave a voicemail. Elena, this is childish. We agreed to handle this professionally. All you have to do is sign. Don't make this difficult. She saved the voicemail and went to meet James at a restaurant downtown, a quiet Italian place where they could talk without being overheard. James arrived in a suit that cost more than the Honda Marcus had generously allowed her to keep, carrying a leather briefcase and an expression that meant he was working. They ordered wine and pasta neither of them would finish, and James spread documents across the table like he was preparing for war. "Here's what we know," he said, keeping his voice low. "David Chin's contract as CEO is up for renewal in 6 weeks. The board vote happens at the annual shareholders meeting on the 15th of next month. Normally this would be a formality, automatic renewal, handshake and champagne. But the bylaws state that any stakeholder holding more than 20% can call for a leadership review and propose alternative candidates. You hold 43%. You don't need anyone else's approval." Elena sipped her wine. "What happens if I call for a review?" "You trigger a full audit of executive performance, compensation structures, and strategic direction. It delays the renewal and opens the door for you to propose changes, including personnel changes. You can't fire David outright without cause, but you can make his position uncomfortable enough that he might choose to negotiate." "And Marcus?" James smiled, and it wasn't kind. "Marcus's promotion to executive vice president hasn't been formally approved yet. It was announced internally but hasn't gone through official board channels. If you call for the leadership review, all pending executive appointments get frozen until the review is complete. Marcus stays exactly where he is, or potentially lower if the restructuring suggests his position is redundant." Elena set down her wine glass. "How fast can we do this? I can have the paperwork filed with the board by Monday morning. The review would be called for the next scheduled board meeting, which is in 11 days. David will fight it, obviously, but he can't stop it. The bylaws are clear." "Do it," Elena said. "And the divorce papers?" "Ignore them," James said. "Let him wait. Let him wonder. In 72 hours he'll start to panic, and that's when people make mistakes." 72 hours later, Marcus showed up at the apartment. Elena heard his key in the lock and realized he'd kept a copy, which was either sentimental or strategic, and she suspected the latter. He walked in without knocking, found her sitting on the couch with her laptop and a cup of tea, and stared at her like she'd personally betrayed him. "You didn't sign," he said flatly. Elena looked up from her screen. "No, I didn't." "Why not?" She closed the laptop, set it aside, and folded her hands in her lap. "Because the terms weren't acceptable." Marcus laughed, sharp and incredulous. "The terms were generous, Elena. I'm giving you the apartment. I'm giving you half the savings. What more do you want?" "I want you to stop pretending you're doing me a favor," Elena said calmly. "You're leaving me for your boss's daughter because it benefits your career. That's fine. People make choices. But don't insult my intelligence by framing it as generosity." Marcus's jaw tightened. "This isn't about intelligence. This is about you being bitter." "I'm not bitter," Elena said, and it was true. She felt many things: sadness, anger, a cold kind of clarity, but bitterness wasn't one of them. "I'm just not interested in making your transition convenient." "You're going to make this difficult?" Marcus asked, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "After everything I've done for you? After I've supported you for 8 years?" Elena almost laughed. "Almost? You've supported me?" "Yes," Marcus said, taking a step closer. "You've been coasting on freelance work that barely pays rent. I've been carrying us financially. I've been the one with the stable career, the one making real money. And now you're going to punish me for wanting more." Elena looked at him, really looked at him, and realized he genuinely believed this. He genuinely thought he'd been the provider, the stability, the success. He'd never once asked what freelance consulting meant. He'd never looked at her bank statements. He'd never wondered why she never seemed stressed about money. He'd assumed, and she'd let him, because it hadn't mattered until now. If you're still watching at this point, Drop a comment with "I'm still here," and let's see who's truly following this shocking story. Because what happens next is going to blow your mind, and I need to know you're ready for it. Marcus has no idea what's coming, and neither does Victoria or her father. Stay with us. Get out, Elena said quietly. Marcus blinked. What? Get out of my apartment. You don't live here anymore. You kept a key without asking. That's trespassing. Leave or I'll call the police. For the first time, Marcus looked uncertain. Elena, come on. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable, she said, standing up, meeting his eyes. You want a divorce? Fine. We'll do it properly, through lawyers, through court if necessary. But you don't get to walk into my home and lecture me about gratitude. You made your choice. Now live with it. Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked to the door. Before he left, he looked back. You're going to regret this, he said. Elena didn't respond. She just watched him leave, heard the door close, heard his footsteps fade down the hallway. Then she picked up her phone and texted James. He came by. He's rattled. How's the filing going? James responded immediately. Submitted this morning. Board meeting is set for next Thursday. David Chun just found out. He's furious. Elena smiled. Good. The next week moved like a chess game, deliberate and unforgiving. David Chun called an emergency meeting with his executive team to discuss the unexpected stakeholder review, which was corporate speak for someone just threw a grenade into our boardroom. Marcus attended that meeting. He sat in his usual seat at the long conference table, across from Victoria, next to 3 other vice presidents, and listened as David explained that Hartwell Capital had invoked a leadership audit, and that all pending executive changes were on hold until the review was complete. This is unusual, David said, his voice controlled but tight with anger. Hartwell has been a silent partner for years. This kind of aggressive move suggests they're unhappy with our direction, or they're positioning for a power play. Either way, we need to be prepared. One of the other vice presidents, a woman named Sandra Kim who ran marketing, raised her hand. Do we know who specifically at Hartwell initiated this? Is it James Hartwell? David shook his head. We don't know. Hartwell Capital is privately held. They don't disclose internal decision-making. My contact at their legal firm says the directive came from the primary stakeholder, but they wouldn't give me a name. Marcus felt a cold prickle of unease, though he couldn't articulate why. Hartwell Capital. He'd heard that name before. Elena's last name was Hartwell, but that was a coincidence. Her family had money, old Seattle money from timber and shipping, but she wasn't involved in corporate ventures. She did freelance consulting. She'd never mentioned investment portfolios or board seats. It couldn't be connected. Victoria caught his eye across the table and gave him a worried smile. Her promotion to Director of Strategic Partnerships was also frozen. Their engagement announcement, planned for her father's birthday party in 2 weeks, was now awkward timing. Everything was on hold, waiting for this review to resolve. After the meeting, Marcus pulled David aside. How long will this take? David's expression was grim. Minimum 3 weeks, possibly 2 months if they drag it out. They've requested full financial disclosures, performance reviews for all executive staff, and strategic planning documents for the last 5 years. It's a proctology exam disguised as due diligence. Can they do this? They own 43% of the company, Marcus. They can do whatever they want. Marcus felt his carefully constructed future starting to crack. What do? We give them nothing to criticize, David said. We run clean, we document everything, and we wait for them to show their hand. In the meantime, keep your head down and don't give anyone a reason to question your value here. Marcus tried to focus on work, but the uncertainty gnawed at him. He called Elena twice more that week, asking her to reconsider the divorce terms, to be reasonable, to remember they'd once cared about each other. She didn't answer. By Friday, he was frustrated enough to drive to the apartment again, but this time he didn't use his key. He knocked, and Elena answered wearing jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, looking tired but composed. "I don't want to fight," Marcus said before she could speak. "I just want to understand why you're making this so complicated." Elena leaned against the doorframe. "Because you made it complicated when you decided I wasn't worth honoring." "That's not fair," Marcus said. "Life isn't fair," Elena replied. "You taught me that 3 weeks ago at a charity gala." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of exasperation. "What do you want, Elena? Really? What will it take for you to sign the papers and let us both move on?" Elena considered this. "I want you to answer one question honestly." "Fine. Do you know what I do for work?" Marcus frowned. "You do freelance consulting, project management, business strategy, things like that. Do you know who my clients are?" "I've never asked," Marcus admitted. "Exactly," Elena said softly. "You've never asked. In 8 years, you've never once been curious about what I do all day, how I spend my time, what I'm capable of. You assumed I was coasting, that I was dependent on you, that I was less than you. And that assumption is why you thought you could hand me divorce papers at a party, and I just accept it." Marcus stared at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you should have asked more questions," Elena said. "I'm saying you should have known who you were married to before you decided I was disposable." Then she closed the door, and Marcus stood in the hallway feeling like he'd just missed something critical but couldn't identify what. The board meeting happened on a Thursday morning at 10 a.m. in Meridian Technologies' downtown headquarters, 19th floor, corner conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Elliott Bay. David Chun arrived early, flanked by his lawyer and his CFO. The other board members arrived in clusters, 7 people representing various investment groups and legacy stakeholders. At 9:58, James Hartwell walked in wearing a charcoal suit and an expression that gave nothing away. At 9:59, Elena Hartwell walked in behind him. She wore a navy blue suit, minimal jewelry, her hair down, heels that brought her to 5'7". She carried a leather portfolio and an air of absolute calm. Marcus, who was sitting in the back of the room as an observer along with other executive staff, felt the floor drop out from under him. David Chun stood up slowly, recognition dawning on his face. "Miss Hartwell," he said carefully, "I didn't realize you'd be attending personally. I thought it was time we met face to face," Elena said, her voice carrying across the room with perfect clarity. "I've been managing my portfolio remotely for 6 years, but given the importance of this review, I felt my presence was necessary." She took a seat at the head of the table, the seat reserved for majority stakeholders, and James sat beside her. The other board members exchanged glances. Marcus felt like he was watching a play where everyone knew the script except him. David remained standing. "With all due respect, Ms. Hartwell, this review is unprecedented. Hartwell Capital has been a supportive, hands-off partner since your grandmother's initial investment in 1987. This sudden intervention raises questions about your confidence in our leadership." Elena opened her portfolio, pulled out a bound report, and slid it across the table toward David. "This document outlines my concerns regarding executive compensation structures, strategic diversification, and long-term growth projections. I've highlighted several areas where I believe Meridian is underperforming relative to market position. The review isn't personal, Mr. Chun. It's practical." David picked up the report, his jaw tight. "And the timing? 6 weeks before my contract renewal. The timing is relevant to the contract renewal, Elena said evenly. I want to ensure that leadership decisions moving forward are aligned with shareholder interests. That includes evaluating not just your performance, but the performance and judgment of your executive team. She let her gaze drift across the room, landing briefly on Marcus before returning to David. Marcus felt ice slide down his spine. Victoria, sitting 3 seats away from Marcus, looked between Elena and her father with growing alarm. Dad, what is she talking about? David held up a hand, silencing his daughter, his eyes never leaving Elena. Are you questioning my ability to lead this company? I'm questioning whether your recent decisions prioritize company value or personal interests, Elena said. She pulled out another document. For example, 3 weeks ago you announced the promotion of Marcus Hartwell to Executive Vice President without board approval, and without completing the standard performance review process required for C-suite appointments. That promotion coincided with your daughter Victoria beginning a personal relationship with Mr. Hartwell following his separation from his wife. The optics are problematic. The room went dead silent. Every board member turned to look at Marcus and Victoria. David's face flushed. That promotion was based on merit. Then you'll have no trouble demonstrating that merit during the review, Elena said calmly. I've requested Marcus's performance evaluations for the last 3 years, his project outcomes, and comparative analysis against his peers. If the promotion is justified, the data will support it. James leaned forward. We've also requested documentation regarding any potential conflicts of interest involving executive personal relationships and advancement decisions. It's standard procedure during leadership audits. Victoria made a small sound, something between a gasp and a protest. Marcus couldn't move. He was staring at Elena, at this woman he'd lived with for 8 years, who was systematically dismantling his career with surgical precision while discussing it like a quarterly earnings report. David sat down heavily. You're the Hartwell he's married to. It wasn't a question. Elena met his eyes. I'm the Hartwell he was married to. We're currently in divorce proceedings. Another board member, an older man named Robert Finch who represented a venture capital group, cleared his throat. Ms. Hartwell, are you using this review as leverage in a personal dispute? No, Elena said simply. I'm using this review to ensure that the company I'm the majority stakeholder in is being run ethically and effectively. The fact that my personal life intersects with that review is unfortunate, but irrelevant to the underlying questions about leadership and judgment. She looked at Marcus directly for the first time. My husband chose to leave me for an executive's daughter and accept a promotion facilitated by that relationship. Those are his choices, but they're also data points that speak to character and decision-making, which are relevant when evaluating someone for a C-suite position. Marcus found his voice, though it came out rough. Elena, you can't do this. I can actually, Elena said. I'm doing it right now. James pulled out a stack of papers. The review will take approximately 4 weeks. During that time, all pending promotions are frozen, all executive compensation packages are under examination, and all major strategic decisions require majority stakeholder approval. At the end of the review, Ms. Hartwell will present her recommendations to the board, and we'll vote on leadership continuity and structural changes. David looked at Elena with something that might have been respect or might have been hatred. You could destroy this company. I could, Elena agreed. But I won't. I'm going to make it better. I'm going to make sure it's run by people who understand loyalty, ethics, and the difference between professional merit and personal convenience. She closed her portfolio. Gentlemen, I'll see you in 4 weeks with my findings. In the meantime, I expect full cooperation and transparency. Thank you for your time." The meeting ended. Elena and James left first, walking out together without looking back. The board members filed out in uncomfortable silence. David sat motionless, staring at the report Elena had left behind. Victoria was crying quietly, her hands over her face. Marcus stood up slowly, his legs unsteady, and walked out into the hallway where Elena was waiting by the elevators. "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking on the word. Elena turned to face him. "Because you asked me what I wanted. I wanted you to understand who you threw away." "This is revenge," Marcus said. "This is you punishing me for leaving." "This is me protecting my investment," Elena corrected. "If you'd bothered to ask about my work, if you'd shown even passing interest in my life, you would have known I own this company. You would have known that courting the boss's daughter while betraying your wife was spectacularly stupid. But you didn't ask. You assumed. And assumptions have consequences." The elevator arrived. James stepped in, holding the door. "Are you going to fire me?" Marcus asked desperately. Elena stepped into the elevator. "I'm going to let the review determine if you ever deserve the position you have. If the data says you're competent, you'll keep your job. If it says you were promoted because of who you're sleeping with, you'll be restructured. Either way, you'll know you earned whatever comes next." The doors started to close. Marcus put his hand out, stopping them. "I loved you, Elena. I really did." Elena looked at him with something that might have been sadness. "No, Marcus. You loved what I let you believe I was. You never bothered to find out who I actually am." She removed his hand gently from the door. "Now you know." The elevator closed and Marcus stood alone in the hallway of a company owned by the woman he'd discarded, realizing he'd destroyed his own future and hadn't even known he was doing it. For weeks later, the review was complete. James presented the findings in a closed board session that Marcus and Victoria were not invited to attend. The data showed that Marcus's performance was average, competent but not exceptional, certainly not worthy of an executive vice president role. His promotion had been premature and politically motivated. David Chen's leadership was rated adequate, but increasingly nepotistic, with several decisions in the past 2 years showing preference for personal relationships over company interests. The board voted, and Elena's recommendations were accepted by a margin of 6-1. David Chen remained CEO but with reduced authority and increased oversight. His contract renewal was approved for 2 years instead of the standard 5. Marcus's promotion was officially retracted. He remained Senior Vice President of Operations, but with a compensation adjustment reflecting actual performance metrics. Victoria's pending promotion to Director of Strategic Partnerships was postponed indefinitely pending completion of standard qualification reviews. The engagement between Marcus and Victoria was quietly cancelled 2 weeks later. Whether it was the embarrassment, the professional fallout, or simply the realization that their relationship had been built on ambition rather than affection, neither of them spoke about it publicly. Marcus moved to a smaller apartment in a less expensive neighborhood. He kept his job because the data said he was competent, but he walked the halls of Meridian Technologies knowing everyone knew who he was and what he'd done. Elena sold the apartment she'd once shared with Marcus and bought a house in Madison Park with a view of Lake Washington. She started attending board meetings in person, taking an active role in Meridian's strategic direction. She became known as a fair but exacting stakeholder who asked difficult questions and expected honest answers. The divorce was finalized quietly, with terms that reflected actual asset division, including Marcus's discovery that Elena had never needed his financial support and had, in fact, been the primary earner throughout their marriage through passive investment income. He signed the papers without protest. 6 months after the gala, Elena ran into Victoria at a coffee shop near the Meridian offices. Victoria was waiting for her order, looking tired and older than 26. When she saw Elena, she hesitated, then walked over. "I owe you an apology," Victoria said without preamble. "I didn't know you were married when Marcus and I started seeing each other. He told me you were separated. By the time I realized the truth, I was already—" She paused, searching for words. "Invested." Elena looked at her, this young woman who'd been part of the destruction of her marriage, and felt mostly tired. "He's very good at making people feel like they're special," Elena said. "Like they're the only person who understands him. It's convincing until you realize he does it with everyone." Victoria nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. For all of it. For not asking harder questions." "I appreciate that," Elena said, and meant it. They stood in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Then Victoria asked, "Did you really buy Meridian just to get revenge on Marcus?" Elena almost laughed. "I didn't buy Meridian. I inherited 43% of it when my grandmother died 6 years ago. I've owned it longer than I was married to Marcus. The review wasn't revenge. It was due diligence." Victoria processed this. "So all of this, the audit, the promotions being frozen, that was just business?" "It was business that happened to intersect with my personal life," Elena said. "If Marcus had been qualified for the promotion, he would have kept it. The data didn't support it. That's not my fault." "But you knew it wouldn't," Victoria said. "You knew he'd been promoted because of me, because of my dad." Elena picked up her coffee from the counter, thanked the barista, and turned back to Victoria. "I knew a lot of things," she said. "I knew Marcus was ambitious. I knew your father valued loyalty over competence sometimes. I knew that mixing personal relationships with professional advancement is usually a bad idea. What I didn't know was whether anyone would be honest about it if given the chance. The review gave everyone that chance." Victoria looked down at her hands. "My dad barely talks to me now." "That's between you and your father," Elena said gently. "But if it helps, the review showed that you're actually quite talented at partnership development. Your metrics were solid. You would have earned the director position eventually without any family influence. You just needed more time." Victoria looked up surprised. "Really? Really?" Elena confirmed. "I included that in my recommendations. You're on track for promotion next quarter if you want it." For the first time, Victoria smiled slightly. "Thank you." Elena nodded. "Take care, Victoria." She walked out of the coffee shop into bright Seattle sunshine, carrying her coffee and feeling lighter than she had in months. A year after the gala, Elena attended another charity event, this one for children's literacy, held at the Museum of History and Industry. She wore a different black dress, newer, more expensive, one that fit the woman she'd become rather than the woman she'd been. She walked through the crowd confidently, stopping to talk with other donors, with board members from various organizations, with people who knew her name and her reputation. Across the room she saw Marcus. He was alone, nursing a glass of wine, looking out the window at the lake. He'd lost weight. He looked older. She watched him for a moment, feeling nothing in particular, no anger, no satisfaction, just a distant curiosity about the life he was living now. He turned, saw her, and for a second their eyes met. He raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement, not quite a toast, just recognition. Elena raised hers in return. Then she turned away and went to find James, who was talking with a group of tech investors near the silent auction tables. "Ready to leave?" James asked when she joined them. "Actually, no," Elena said, looking around the room at the people, the lights, the possibilities. "I think I'll stay a while." There's a panel discussion on educational equity starting in 20 minutes. I want to hear what they have to say." James smiled, the kind of smile that said he was proud of her. "I'll save you a seat." Elena spent the rest of the evening listening to people talk about problems that mattered and solutions that could work. She wrote a substantial check to the Literacy Foundation. She exchanged business cards with 3 people doing interesting work in educational technology. She stayed until the end, until the last speech was finished and the crowd was thinning out. When she finally left, walking out into cool night air that smelled like rain and salt water, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like herself. Complete. Valued. Exactly where she belonged. Before you go, if this story moved you, if you believe in justice for those who were underestimated and discarded, then do us a favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling us what you thought about Elena's journey, and subscribe to Leora Folktales so you never miss another story of courage and comeback. Share this with someone who needs to remember that being underestimated is sometimes the greatest advantage you can have. We'll see you in the next story, and trust us, it's going to be just as powerful. Until then, remember that your value is never determined by someone else's failure to see it.